Hey, welcome back. This is perhaps one of my favorite shows in which we look at individuals who have traveled the world. And Dustin Homan, Dustin is the program manager with the 4-H Special Projects with the Ohio State University Extension 4-H Youth Development. And Dustin has seen quite a bit of the world, and it's been his working with the students in helping them to better understand the cultures that are surrounding. And Dustin has a really neat guest who's going to talk about Brazil. Dustin, welcome.
Hey, thank you, Patrick. And Happy New Year to all of our viewers, as well as to you, Patrick. I haven't seen you since December.
Since last year.
Yeah, since last year, that's right.
And so I've had to review many of your different videos because I miss this segment of culture. And it's always a pleasure talking with you, Dustin. Dustin, who's your guest?
Yeah, I'm honored to have with me a friend who found time in his schedule. This is a really busy guy, and it doesn't surprise me. He's a past 4-H'er and FFA'er, and if you know anything about those students, they tend to keep very busy. My guest today is Matthew Klopfenstein. Matthew is a junior here at Ohio State, the Columbus campus. He's majoring in agricultural engineering with a focus in machinery systems and double minoring in agribusiness and international economic development. And Matthew is going to tell us a little bit about a country south of the border. We have not ventured into South America on our Culture Cast programming before, but today we do. Today
I'm looking forward to it.
I am as well. So before we get things, we start talking too much about Brazil, the country in South America. Matthew, will you tell the viewers a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so as he said, I'm a junior here at Ohio State. I grew up in Northwest Ohio on a farm where we focused mainly on corn and soybean production, as well as a little bit of forage production. I was strongly involved in FFA and 4-H, and traveling has always been a passion. Recently, over New Year's, I traveled to Dallas to get certified as a youth development speaker. That way I can sort of give back to some of the programs that helped me so much when I was a youngster. So that was in Dallas, Texas, and I came back. But international travel is always fun. And about a year ago, from right now, I was in Brazil. And trust me, right now, I'm wishing I was there because it's a lot warmer there than here.
So Matthew is going to tell us a little bit about Brazil, as he previously mentioned. And we have a picture that we're going to show of a map of Brazil for those of you may not be as familiar with South America. Brazil is a huge country. It's the largest country in South America, and it's actually the 6th largest country in the world, just slightly smaller than the United States. So if you can imagine the differences across climate, people across the United States, I'm sure Matthew may be able to attest. You see some of that in Brazil. Just a little bit of background about Brazil. It's the 8th largest economy in the world, so there's a lot of products being made and exported out of Brazil. Most people probably know it for the Amazon rainforest. And 86% of the population actually live in urban areas. So it's highly concentrated in the urban areas. And Matthew, on that note, tell us a little bit about your first reactions to when you got to Brazil and the culture.
Right, so if you look on that map there, I flew into Sao Paulo, which is towards the southern third of the country. And that's where I spent most of my time while I was in Brazil. So I didn't go all the way up north where the Amazon rainforest was, but I landed in Sao Paulo, and Sao Paulo is a city of 18 to 19 million people. So just being immersed in that right away was a little bit of a culture shock.
Is that the largest city in the country?
I don't know.
Okay.
I know it's one of the largest, and it was just a lot of high-rise apartments. You'd go for a while, then there'd just be sort of suburb area, and then there'd be a lot of high-rises once again. Traffic there was quite heavy.
Oh, I can't even imagine.
But Brazil, sort of when it settled, a lot of their heavy populated areas is right on the coast, similar to when the United States was settled. We started east, moved our way west. Exact same thing happened in Brazil.
So let's get into Matthew's experience in Brazil. So first of all, Matthew, how did you end up in Brazil?
So here at Ohio State, I'm a part of an honorary professional fraternity called Alpha Zeta Partners. And through that, they're focused on leadership development. And there's 4 seminars that you go through during your first year of membership. This study abroad trip to Brazil is the 3rd seminar. So we go down there. There's about 20 per class, depending on the year. When I went, there were 16 of us. And we spend 6 weeks in Brazil. The first 3 weeks, we study at the University of Sao Paulo, specifically their School of Agriculture, which is called Uzalki, which is in Piracicaba, which is about 2 hours away from Sao Paulo. And then the last 3, we do a bus trip and travel and visit agriculture industry and different culture aspects while we're there.
So on the note about the university, we have a couple pictures that Matthew took to show you what a classroom looks like in Brazil. And I was really surprised when you put this photo in our folder box. I thought, did you take a picture of a classroom here in the US? I was astonished how similar it looks. Did you feel the same?
Yeah, there was many aspects that were really similar and some that were really different. So there, as far as architecture goes, the classrooms are more or less the same. Air conditioning, however, is not. So they most of the time have like a very open courtyard type styles of architecture, and then a classroom have their own like window AC units.
Okay.
And it's a very humid climate, but as far as classroom structure, it's much different than what we have here at Ohio State.
And the next picture will show you, I presume, is this a lecture hall?
This is not a lecture hall.
Okay.
This is actually a co-op, and it's specifically an auction block. It's a Dutch auction, and right there is mainly co-op for flowers and produce.
Okay.
So it's, yeah, that was a neat setting, but that is not a classroom.
I initially assumed that was a classroom, and just you see people look like they are literally standing on top of each other for this. So when you took this photo, was there a live auction going on?
Yeah, so co-ops are really, really important in Brazil. I would say even more important to agriculture than compared here in the United States. But the specific about this auction is it's a Dutch auction, so it doesn't work like when you want to bid, you raise your hand. Here, there's a clock in the front, and you can sort of see the screen in the corner of the picture, and they're bringing the flowers in front, and as the flowers go by, that's what's specifically being sold. But the first person to hit the button gets the flowers. So the bid starts high and then gradually falls, and whoever hits the button first gets the lot of flowers.
Fascinating.
So it's a little backwards.
So then you're not really competing against anyone. You're just hoping that no one else hits the buzzer before you.
In a way, you're still competing because if you have a certain product you need and you want a really low price, but you don't know exactly the price break point or where the market's at, it's just really interesting. And it's very, very fast paced.
That's a fascinating way. It'd be really interesting to look at the economics of it, to see like in a typical auction structure here in the US where highest bidder wins, what's the difference in bids based on those two different systems. But let's keep moving along with some of your photos here, Matthew. Tell us a little bit about what we see here.
Yes. So since this is a really nice transition from the last photo, so this is an orchid farm. And so this producer would send their orchids, their products, to an auction like that last picture. And an orchid farm it's just beautiful. I've never seen so many orchids in my life. And the interesting thing about here is a lot of their system was automated, but they had a lot of hand labor as well. Like they would scan each plant to make sure to measure for health and color, and it would sort through the system. But the amount of investment in the orchid industry is truly amazing, similar to what you would find in a different fruits and produce here in the United States, where they have to be able to plan ahead so far in advance to make their product happen. It takes 3 to 5 years just to develop a certain variety of orchid, and then that's just to get the variety going before they can actually start marketing it.
Do you know, in terms of orchid producers in the world, where does Brazil rank?
I probably knew when I was there, but I don't. Depending on the part of the country, the flower production is mainly in the southern third, and then each part of the country, is similar to the United States, has their own agricultural focus.
Okay. And there's some more photos of agriculture that we'll show in a little bit. But before we get to that, tell us here about, looks like you were knighted.
Yeah, so a big thing in Brazil is Carnival, which would be similar to our Mardi Gras, except it's way, way bigger, and it goes on for weeks at a time. And so there specifically, we went to a samba school in Sao Paulo, and they were prepping for Carnival because Carnival was about 2 weeks away. And they let us try on different costumes and things, and they specifically made sure that we were not allowed to use these photos until after Carnival because it's very secretive about what each dance school is bringing to their parade. And it was a very, very cultural experience, and they just loved the samba.
When is
Carnival?
Yeah.
It's normally in mid-February, and then it goes into the beginning of March.
Okay, and this was right in the middle of when you were there.
Yes.
So did you actually get to see?
We
Carnival?
did not. If
Oh,
I would have
man.
stayed one more week, I would have been able to see the beginning of Carnival.
There's probably a strategic reason why the college had that study abroad and Carnival started. So I always like these photos where we're showing structures and the different architecture, but some of the photos that mean the most to me are the ones with other people in them from other cultures. And we'll see a photo of that, Matthew, with a family here. Tell us about these folks.
Yeah, so one unique thing about the program, it was definitely one of my highlights, was we got to spend a weekend with the host family. So this was my family. That was my dad, Cassio, and my little brother, he was 4, and my host mom, and they were just absolutely fantastic people. They treated me so well and welcomed me into their family.
That had to be a treat for you since you're the youngest.
Yeah, so I'm
Now
the...
you had a little brother for a
Yes.
couple of days.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
How did the people in Brazil view people from the United States?
Good question.
Yeah, they were, for the most part, they're a very welcoming culture. There's some really things that contribute to that. One is, I could not tell you out of my 6 weeks of being there what a typical Brazilian looks like. I could not draw you a picture. Whereas here in the United States, you could probably draw a picture of what a typical American would look like. And just that, it's such a melting pot, and to the point that I question whether the United States is truly as much of a melting pot as we say when compared to Brazil. For example, it was very evident when we talked to different professors and people who came to the United States, with all the paperwork they filled out, they always got stumped on one specific part, and that was ethnicity. They didn't know what it meant because Brazilian wasn't an option. And that just sort of mind boggles anymore here in the United States. When we fill out a form, you have to say, I'm Caucasian, I'm Hispanic, Latino, whatever it may be. To them, it's, if you're black, you're black. If you're not, you're a different color. I mean, it's irrelevant. You're all just Brazilian.
That's really interesting. You wonder then on their forms that ask that what their options might be. Did you get any chance to see anything like that?
No, I never asked that follow-up question because I was just taken back by the fact that that wasn't a thought process of what ethnicity are you or where are you from. I mean, it could just be based on location or region or.
What language did they speak?
Portuguese. So it's similar to Spanish, but when you know a little bit of Spanish and think, hey, I got this figured out, and use Spanish, it gets you into trouble.
I think that was one of my misconceptions was I just assume everyone south of the U.S. speaks Spanish, but that's not the case.
No, I believe it's one of the only countries, I think there might be one other one in South America that speaks Portuguese.
And I assume is that attributed to, were they a colony of Portugal
Yes.
at one time? Okay.
Yep.
I think that's fantastic. Dustin, every time you have a show, I put going to whatever that country is at the top of my bucket list, and it really sounds fantastic. And we're going to take a quick station break. We're talking with Dustin Homan, who's talking with Matthew Klopfenstein and his trip to Brazil. We'll be right back. Hey, welcome back. I'm Patrick Dangle. We're talking with Dustin Homan. Dustin Homan is the program manager with the 4-H Special Projects College of Food, Agriculture, Environmental Sciences with the Ohio State University Extension 4-H Youth Development. And we're talking about Brazil. I think it's just phenomenal, the experiences that you have, Matthew.
And during these culture casts, I always want to be sure we highlight food because I feel like that is the one common language that all of us share. So if we could skip ahead a couple of photos, there's one of Matthew with this huge, well, we'll start with this one. This looks like a sweet treat.
Yeah, it's actually a pizza.
Really?
So pizza there is a little bit different. And this was specifically a dessert pizza. So that I would prefer a Brazilian dessert pizza over an American dessert pizza any day.
Yeah.
So the ingredients on that pizza are pretty much your dough, dark chocolate, and then white chocolate. That's it. And one night for dinner, I decided I was hungry for pizza, and I thought, might as well have a chocolate pizza. So I did, and that was
your entree?
Yeah, that was my whole meal right there. Half a chocolate pizza. Yes, I did finish it, and it was absolutely wonderful.
So what was for dessert that night?
And that was everything all combined.
Appetizer, all in. There's another photo I want to jump to, which I think some Americans are probably familiar with. When we talk about Brazilian, they may think about Brazilian steakhouses. Now, you got to experience this. What was this like?
So Brazilian steakhouse is really a wonderful experience, and I really want to go to one here in the United States to compare the Brazilian version to the Americanized version. But pretty much it's a fantastic buffet, and when you go to a steakhouse like this, the meal lasts at least 2 hours. And that's actually pretty typical for Brazil because they're very easygoing. They're not worried about, being on time or being late. It's more important to stay and connect with the people you're around, so meals naturally last longer. But this specific meal, I prepared by not eating breakfast and eating a light dinner the night before because there's a salad bar. We went through 7 appetizers. And then there was, I believe, 17 different cuts of meat, pork, beef, chicken, lamb. It was just a wonderful, wonderful experience.
And do they serve all the meat on those skewers?
Yeah, so they bring around those skewers and they ask you in Portuguese if you would like more, and if you do, you say yes. But I always said un pouco because that means a little. I just want a little. Sometimes the servers just hacked off a huge piece anyway, so you had to be very adamant that un pouco. But it was, they go around and ask you if you want more, and they cut a little bit off, put on your plate, you could eat, and then they'd bring some more, and if you wanted a specific cut, you could ask them to bring that instead.
And on this notion of meat, when you would go out into the countryside, I know you have a few photos of some machinery.
Mm-hmm.
What were the staple agricultural products that were being grown and raised?
Yeah, so beef is definitely a staple of Brazil. Everywhere you go, you're going to see a lot of beef on pasture. The majority of their beef in Brazil is grass-fed. As far as other agricultural products, there's a lot of sugarcane. They have corn, they have beans, and then they also have a wide variety of fruits and veggies and canola oil and different things. But the main staples, I would say, I mean, you could look up the specifics, but from the impression in the areas I got, corn, soybeans, beef, sugarcane.
So minus the sugarcane, similar products
Yeah.
to what you see in the U.S. Are we looking at a dairy?
Yeah, so this is a dairy, and it's a very small dairy, nothing huge. I think they had maybe 60 head there. But interesting thing about dairies in Brazil is 90% of the dairies are open pasture grass fed. So this dairy was in the process of putting them into a barn, sort of a confined space, and eventually that's sort of the trend that the industry is going to. But for the most part, no matter what the agriculture sector in Brazil, if you looked at meat, even if it was the same product as something we have here in the United States, the management practice are just vastly different. And part of it is just, the approach mindset is different as far as what the market wants, but also the environment. They're a tropical climate. And so that changes a lot of their production and different timelines. If you jump to a picture with the John Deere combine, we went to a soybean, a crop production farm, and they were harvesting soybeans that day. So we went out. As you can see, the machines pretty much look like brand new John Deere combines. So, I mean, I know initially when I went to Brazil, I thought, their agriculture isn't necessarily as advanced as ours. And I was wrong. They're not exactly where we are, but they're very close. It's not too far apart. But it's hard to tell in this picture, but these soybeans they're harvesting actually are still green.
Do they have large farms like we have in the United States and in Ohio?
Yes, they do. You can see that field that they're in right there is several thousand acres that they're harvesting. They actually had 3 combines running at once in that field. So large farms there are very common. And there's also, areas, there's a lot of small family farms like that dairy we showed. But yeah, they were harvesting in this, and the beans were still green, and I thought, why are we harvesting so early? I mean, in the United States, we want to wait until, they're dried down to the right moisture, and here they said, depending on the season, once the rainy season starts, which is about to start there in a couple weeks, if they don't have their crops off, there's a very high likelihood they'll never get back in the field to finish. So they harvest earlier, even though the moisture is higher, and then they dry it later in storage.
It's kind of a matter of survival. But like you were saying, based on your climate, different practices than what we employ here. Now, I know I think we're running short on time, and I want to be sure the last question I always ask everyone, Matthew, is tell our viewers, why should they visit Brazil?
One, traveling abroad is, even if it's not to Brazil, I highly recommend it because it gives you perspective. Not just about where you are in life, but where you live, and it makes you appreciate what you come from and your heritage as well. Reasons I love Brazil, one is the food. The steakhouses, the chocolate pizza are just, it's a great experience. The people there are very, very welcoming. Even though I didn't speak Portuguese, I learned some while I was there. I was far from fluent. Even, if I was at a restaurant trying to order and struggling, they still tried to communicate me even after the order was done, just to find out about me and connect. That to me says a lot about the culture and the welcoming of the Brazilians in general. And then also just from an agriculture perspective, Brazil is an agriculture power. I mean, they're in the top 5. And just to see where they are, their ability, and just the differences between industries. And then lastly, Brazil is beautiful. It's just a beautiful country, and it has lots and lots of different landscapes because it's so big.
And there's some photos we didn't get to showing some of that landscape, and I hope that maybe there's an example of, this was a dam.
Yeah, this is a dam that's 7 times larger than Hoover Dam. It's Itapu. It's up river from Iguaçu Falls, which is the next photo, which is one of the 7 wonders of the world.
It's amazing.
The dam was one of the 7 engineering wonders of the world. Both just absolutely, the picture doesn't even come close to capturing the beauty, and that's not even all the falls in one picture.
Now is that the Amazon River? Part of the Amazon?
That is not. The Amazon River is up north, and that is down south on the border of Argentina and Brazil.
And that dam's on the border, right?
Yeah.
Did you cross over?
Yeah, the dam is on the border of Brazil and Paraguay.
Okay. So did you cross over into
I
Paraguay?
did. I went to Paraguay. I went to Argentina. It was a great trip.
We'll have to have Matthew back to talk about his trip to Paraguay.
Oh,
How long did that?
It lasted maybe an hour.
No, I find Brazil to be such a warm culture, not necessarily humidity-wise, but just warm and with people.
You're most certainly right.
Yeah, and I think, the world got a little taste of that with the 2014 FIFA World Cup being there and the 2016 Summer Olympics being there. And just watching that on TV, I know, was enough to make me want to go someday. And based on Matthew's experience, Patrick, it looks like we're going to have to head down there around Carnival time.
I think so. I'll put that at the top of my bucket list.
All right.
We're talking with Dustin Homan. Dustin Homan is a 4-H Special Projects, the program manager with the College of Food, Agriculture, and Environmental Sciences. Primarily works with the OSU Extension, the 4-H development. And as you can see, Dustin works with many great individuals who touch lives throughout the world and throughout the culture. And that's the importance of 4-H programs, etc. I want to thank Dustin and Matthew for sharing their time.
Thank you.
Yeah, and again, I want to echo what you said. Matthew is a fantastic speaker. As he mentioned, he's just been trained in the Zig Ziglar method and methodology, and he's now available. He's on tour now. So
very good.
I would
Great.
encourage people to reach out to him, and I'm sure he'd love to talk more about his Brazil trip and some of those presentations too.
Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, and we will look forward to our next episode of Culture Cast. I'm Patrick. Thank you for listening.